Let's think about God. Many times, people wonder, how can it be that God does not become visible? How can it be that we cannot see God? And it is that, certainly, to recognize God we must pay attention to the characteristics that allow us to conceptualize Him correctly, because only then can we find Him. With this, we are saying that the problem of seeing God is linked to a question of knowing how to distinguish Him so that by looking at Him we can recognize Him. Taken to think about these characteristics of God, we can highlight three as important. Thus, we can say, as the first element, that God has been the creator, and continues to be, therefore, the seas, the mountains, the air, and the fire, as well as the life itself, vegetable and animal, have been and they are part of His work. We can also add omnipresence as a second characteristic, since we understand that God is present everywhere, even at the same time. And speaking of time, the third characteristic, perhaps the most recognized of God, we can mention eternity, because we understand that God has been from the beginning, He is and will always be. When searching, it would be good to start by looking at the first of the characteristics. That is, how did the seas, the mountains, the air, and the fire rise on the earth? Even how did life arise in her? In this search we find the answer that science gives us, which essentially says that the earth was created, in the beginning, from an incandescent mass, which surely has detached from our sun because of some interplanetary collision, something that today we can verify, because the center of the earth is still an incandescent mass, this being evidenced when we see volcanoes that still erupt lava from the magma core of the earth. That incandescent mass, detachment from the sun, says science that it has been cooling little by little through the millions of years that have passed, forming the seas, mountains, lakes, rivers, and air, and all the life we know on our planet. Everything that exists in the world has the same DNA as the sun itself, because the molecular basis of everything that makes up the earth, including living beings, is of the same type of atoms, with a nucleus made up of different numbers of protons and neutrons, and peripheral electrons, completely identical to those that make up the sun itself. That is, our entire body, everything we eat and drink, everything that makes up the earth is made of dust from our sun star. Going to the recognition of the second characteristic, omnipresence, in addition to the fact that it is evidenced in the atomic material of the sun that makes up all of creation, science also tells us that, in fact, the sun's rays in form of photons are equally omnipresent, and these are the ones that day by day provide the light that allows plants to synthesize chlorophyll, which on land and sea constitute the first link in the trophic chain of nutrient and energy transfer, which allows life here on Earth. So we can understand that not only the sun is omnipresent in the constituent material of every one of the things that make up the Earth, but also its light energy is omnipresent, giving life to the beings of all species. Regarding the third characteristic of eternity, science tells us that the sun has been long before the earth appeared, that is, from our earthly gaze the sun has no beginning since it is before our existence as a species, as well as, since our perspective will not have an end either, since it will subsist human existence. The sun is indeed one more star among the millions of stars that make up the universe, but that only tells us that the characteristics of creation, omnipresence, and eternity are not exclusive to our sun, but are shared by many other suns. That there is one God or more than one does not make a difference in terms of those characteristics. Even none of this prevents us from seeing that our sun, which we can recognize as the omnipresent and eternal creator God of our planet Earth, is only one. The problem of not having been able to distinguish the sun as our God until now, perhaps is cultural and religious, since many beliefs of the human being installed in the culture and the faith of the people have given an idea of spiritual God, distancing it of our ability to see and recognize it. It should be noted that this recognition of the sun as our God does not contradict the sacred writings that various religions have, which have given God a different name, even in different languages, since those religious messages that have served as a spiritual guide to people are inspired by the teachings of many prophets who have come into the world, through the work of the sun itself, to help us live a fuller and happier life, to teach us prayers to thank God, giving us all of them the message that God really exists, that our flesh, blood, and bones are part of Him, that everything we eat and drink is work of His divine grace, that nothing escapes His gaze and that, in fact, He is the light that lights our way,